There's some interaction between those beings and the Creator. There's need to respect creatureliness. They are noble but not all wise. And notice here that the Creator has access to His creation, but creatures cannot go up to where the Creator is. See? The Creator is separate from creation. And here I think you're realizing that this is a biblical ontology, because when you read the creation story, you find all of these elements. And the cardinal sin under this ontology is for a creature to start acting like the Creator. See? That if that happens, then you have sinned under this ontology, which of course you will know also to be the story of Lucifer. That's a biblical ontology. And of course, in the biblical ontology, the realm of the created realm has been seriously damaged by sin. So the separation between the upper realm and the natural realm is now much more complicated because of sin. That's a biblical one. Now there's another ontology which would be called antagonistic dualism. You again have two realms, but there's a big difference. Under this one, this is an ideal realm. There's nothing material here, only ideas, only the ideals. This is a Greek ontology, Plato and so forth. And the material realm is thought to be bad. It's diminished existence. The body and emotions are down here, and they are carnal. They are not spiritual. You have a tension between the spiritual and the carnal. Okay? And this has actually played a big role in Christianity. If you look on this side, there are gradations of being. Down here are the brutes, and up here are the angels. And so, in this ontology, you can descend down the scale of being. And things that pertain to the body are carnal. They get further down the list here as you go. A very important point here is that the essence of a being is in its soul. So under this ontology, what you will find is that the essence of being here is somehow trapped into this realm. And the whole goal toward human thriving here is to get the soul back out of this yucky material realm and up into the spiritual realm. I think my next slide, this slide is somewhat activated, I think. Is that you notice here ideal being or God. If you're a Christian, you will talk about God, and other people talk about God too. But the soul enters down into the material world, and in some ontologies that takes place at conception, where the soul is united with a human egg, and then it begins its journey. And you know it journeys through life, and depending which particular religion you subscribe to, either the church or sacraments, priest, Jesus, some mysterious communications, these are all instruments that take care of the soul on its journey through the material realm. And then when you die, you either go back up to heaven, back to God, or perish the thought. You go down to hell. Oops, one too far. See? And of course, it leaves human beings in something of a quandary. That's how that antagonistic dualism plays out in religion. Okay? So here's Dave's diagram. If you look at the foundational presuppositions, we have a number of options. Okay? How are being and time related? That's the category of being. And you can say it is either timeless or it is temporal and spatial. Meaning that the essence of being is either affected by time or it is outside time where it is not affected by time. Now this is a very abstract idea, but I have to tell you, is that this debate has had a profound impact on Christian theology. And anybody who talks about a soul in a human being, I can tell you right now, has adopted as their foundational category timelessness of being. Right. Now, of course, I'm going to ask you which one do admin to subscribe to, but we'll save that for tomorrow. Another one here is there a realm beyond the natural world? And you could say yes, or you could say no. Right? That's the metaphysical one. How is reality itself construed? This is the ontological one that I just took you through, and you could either go to randomness, you could go to, I can hardly read that, superstitious dualism, You could go to antagonistic dualism. You have all of these that you could go to. So you see that the ontological one is complicated, right? The one on being is not so complicated, but this one is complicated. And then the one other one that is foundational is what kind of knowledge is available? Do you have truth with a capital T, or do you have truth with a small t? Now I put this diagram together because it creates a visual image that every religious system has been built because somebody took various positions in these four categories. Okay? So your religion has a position on being, it has one on ontology, metaphysics, and on epistemology. All religious systems are built on this, and we'll look at those again tomorrow. What's happening in our country is that the last three ontologies that I talked about are at war. Non-antagonistic dualism or creationism is being overrun by naturalism and antagonistic dualism. And it's very difficult to know which of those two are winning. Is naturalism winning or antagonistic dualism? Anybody who is interested in spiritual things, meaning things of the spirit, is probably involved in antagonistic dualism. Scientists would be more interested in naturalism. And the ontological shift away from the creator-creation dualism is part of what is creating highly antagonistic religion attitudes toward theism. And I want to quickly dig into this here, and I don't want to talk for too long here. But notice here that Leslie Newbegin, this is a missionary from years ago, he said way back in 1966, more and more areas of life have been mapped by the research of those who confessed that they did not need the hypothesis of God for this purpose. Okay? So that's something that happened long ago, and it's an outgrowth of naturalism or antagonistic dualism. Well, actually, antagonistic dualism does need a God. This one, I'm not going to read this one. You can see here that the societal problem is now that all these ideas have created conditions where God is no longer an inevitability. In fact, the business of life no longer points to God, or God does not appear to be necessary. Here's another famous comment, Peter Hitchens, the brother of Christopher Hitchens. He said in Australia on TV that the most dangerous idea in human history and philosophy remains the belief that Jesus Christ was the Son of God and rose from the dead. And the show host asked him why, and here is his answer: because it alters the whole of human behavior and all our responsibilities. It turns the universe from a meaningless chaos into a designed place in which there is justice and there is hope, and therefore we all have a duty to discover the nature of that justice and work toward that hope. It alters all of us. If we reject it, it alters us all as well. It is incredibly dangerous. This is why so many people turn against it. Now you realize here that there's an ontological battle. Okay? Hitchens has what ontology? Naturalism. Yeah, he has a naturalistic one. And he says, this idea of a creator, this creationist ontology, he says, is dangerous. It's so dangerous because it means we're not on our own, and you do have some responsibilities beyond what you just choose for yourself. See? That's what's happening here. So let me just look quickly at the antagonistic dualism. Okay, you remember the diagram of it, and I'm going to dash on here. That notice here that with the increasing loss of the idea of a supernatural realm that helps to establish categories for human life, with that loss, in skeptical minds, let me just read the sentence. But with the increasing loss of the viability of supernaturalism in skeptical minds, it cannot be empirically proved, so it must be superstition rather than reality. In other words, you cannot prove the supernatural. You cannot prove it by any scientific or empirical means. Therefore, they would say it is an illusion. But because of the loss of that, the presence and primacy of the soul has morphed into a fascination with the self. The same effect is derived from naturalism. Nothing out there means the focus turns inward, and so we have become fascinated with ourselves. And if you look in our society today, it's all about yourself. Self-help this, self that, self, iTunes, why iTunes? So the sense that there is a world beyond the self becomes dim. Attention is concentrated on the self. Who am I? Becomes an absorbing question, one that would never occur to a person who takes for granted the existence of a real world by which one can orient oneself. See? So if your ontology destroys the supernatural, you are left only with yourself. And if you're going to understand life, where do you look? You don't look outside for reference points, you start to look inside. Okay? And here he continues, the self comes to be seen as an isolated monad which can only be understood from within itself. Thus the inward journey becomes much more fascinating than the exploration of the external world, and psychiatry becomes the dominant element in society. See? Is that we now want to understand ourselves, and it is increasingly the case that people think that the pathway to thriving is to look inside of yourself and to find whatever desires and inclinations you have, and then you unbridle those and you follow them toward self-authentication. And here's an astonishing one. Underneath all of this we find an antinomian sensibility. We are trained to be suspicious of long-standing moral traditions. We are told to adopt a critical attitude toward inherited norms. That's not just an academic habit of mine. It serves a moral conviction, widespread though often tacit, that human beings flourish to the degree that they are free to satisfy their own personal desires. You see, the ontological shift has changed the ethos of our culture. No longer do we look out to God for reference points. We now look inside of ourselves, and everybody is doing their own thing. And if you cut across the path of somebody doing your own thing, you're a bigot, or you're mean, or you're narrow-minded. There's all kinds of names we have for that. So my point here is that this change came at the foundational level. We didn't even know that there was an ontological shift. It's taken place, and it's actually quite far advanced. The greatest wrong in our time is to infringe on the autonomous self. This is even true amongst Christians. I read the other day, the most quoted verse of the Bible is no longer John 3:16, it is Philippians 4:13. What's the difference between those two? Yeah, yes. The one looks out at what God has done. The other one does what? It invites God into what I can do. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad text. I'm just saying it's fascinating that this now, Philippians 4:13, has become the most quoted biblical text. It's a result of us being affected by this ontological shift without realizing it. So, the scene is set for a genuine debate between two conflicting visions, between those who see the individual as a bundle of impulses to be gratified and those who see humanity in the image of God. Between those who see society as a series of private gardens of desire and those who make space for public parks which we do not own but which we jointly maintain for the sake of others and the future. The scene is set for a genuine debate between two conflicting divisions that can be traced down through practice and doctrine and hermeneutics all the way down to the ontological element of human foundations. Here, rules hinder personal development, especially rules about the intimate realities of life. Genuine human flourishing begins with close examination of one's own unique desires and then an endless set of negotiations with others. So I find out who I am, and then I have to continue to negotiate for my own space from you. Okay? Well, I don't think I can read all through this here, but this was a fascinating one because this man pointed out how nihilism is a fascination in our day. And he says here, this is a Polish poet, he said, a true opium for the people is a belief in nothingness after death, the huge solace of thinking that for our betrayals, greed, cowardice, murder, we are not going to be judged. See? I am my own master of my own destiny. I don't have to account to anybody, either now or in eternity. That's the nature of life on planet Earth. So, we've had a glimpse at the thought foundations and how they can affect society and living. I took you down through just the one category of ontology, and I did so hastily, although it took me about an hour and 10 minutes. I'm happy to engage in some conversation here tonight. I don't know if this is clear to you. I always struggle with these because, you know, it's philosophical, it's unusual. I don't think any of you have heard about this before. And yet you understand very clearly what I talked about, I think, that the shift has occurred. It begins with philosophers and trickles down to the street level. And what people back in the 70s and 60s said, do your own thing, they were actually announcing a new ontology without the rest of us knowing it.
But we've had this shift before. That's what I sit here thinking. You're talking as though this is true. This has happened before, because I think of Judges, the last verse in Judges.
Everyone did.
Right. Isn't that what we're doing now? And how did we come back as a society to believe in God, have the Constitution, and then come like this again?
Yeah, you're correct. I'm not suggesting this is the first time in history that it happened. I'm not suggesting it's the first time in history.